Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the shadows of a life so silently brutal, so blisteringly uncomfortable, you'll wonder how anyone managed to survive it, let alone stay invisible doing it. This isn't about flying kicks, throwing stars, or smoke bombs that magically solve problems. No, tonight's story is about what it was really like to be a ninja in feudal Japan. If you're enjoying these bedtime misadventures into the true disgusting heart of history, I'd love if you dropped a like or hit subscribe. It really helps more than you'd think. And hey, let me know in the comments what city and time it is where you're listening. You're not alone in this ninja cave. Now close your eyes and try not to snore. Because tonight you're not just hearing about ninjas, you are one. It is not going well. You begin your new life not in a secret mountaintop temple or a mist-shrouded fortress, but in a rice field, in the rain, pretending to be a deaf peasant. Your mission? To observe without being observed, which sounds poetic until you're 6 hours deep into squatting behind a pig pen with wet feet and a tick crawling up your shin. Forget what the movies told you. Real ninjas didn't wear black pajamas with perfect face masks. They wore whatever made people ignore them. Straw hats, dirty robes, fake limps, shaved eyebrows, occasionally full-on monk cosplay. Blending in was survival. You wanted to disappear so completely that people's eyes just slid off you like water off an oiled radish. Your sensei's idea of training? Absolute misery. Stealth drills involved walking barefoot across gravel blindfolded while he smacked you with a stick every time your toe made a sound. You learned to memorize entire gardens by scent, listen for the exact splash of different sandals, and hold your breath for 2 minutes while hiding in a compost pile. And when you weren't training, you were hungry. Constantly. Ninja food wasn't glamorous. You carried pebbles to suck on for saliva, and dried frogs to chew for protein. Your rice balls were often hollowed out and filled with secret messages. You learned quickly not to eat them, unless failure and betrayal tasted like sticky vinegar rice and regret. Your first real mission involved hiding under a tea house floor for 2 days. 2 days. You had to lie perfectly still beneath wooden planks while noblemen sipped matcha inches above your face. Every breath had to be silent, every muscle still. You couldn't cough, couldn't sneeze, couldn't exist. At one point a rat wandered by and stared at you for 3 full minutes. You blinked first. The rat won. And this wasn't even considered hard. You learned to climb walls using claws tied to your hands, sneak into castles by pretending to be tea-boys or blind beggars, and fake epileptic fits to distract guards. You were expected to know poisons by smell, detect traps by instinct, and speak 3 dialects fluently, including the one used only by eel traders. At night you didn't sleep. Not really. You napped in trees, caves, under porches, wherever your camouflage held. 1 week, you lived as a mute fisherman. The next, a travelling tofu vendor. You stopped remembering your real name. Which was good, because the people who used it were usually the ones trying to kill you. You couldn't trust anyone. Other ninjas were out there too, from rival clans, rival families, or worse, your own side checking for weakness. You left no trail, no scent. You buried your waist 6 inches deep and made sure birds didn't sing near your hideout. Yes, even the birds could give you away. Some lords trained crows to scream at unfamiliar faces. One time, your entire mission was ruined by a goose with a grudge. Your weapons weren't glamorous either. Fancy swords were loud and heavy. You relied on needles, smoke, rope, powder, and clever lies. And when all else failed, you ran. That was the real ninja move. Running like your foot was on fire and your robe was full of bees. Escape was everything. A dead ninja was just a cautionary tale with no moral. And yet, somehow, you survived. You completed missions that never made the scrolls. You vanished into crowds. You passed messages through soup bowls and inked rice. You learned to weaponize silence. And after all that, you weren't given riches, fame, or even a thank you. You were told, quietly, "Good work," then handed another disguise and shoved back into the mud. Because being a ninja wasn't a job, it was an erasure. Your name, your history, your needs, they were luxuries. You became a shadow, a whisper, a footnote in someone else's story, and you kept moving because if you ever stopped, someone else's ninja would be waiting. You're now a shadow in feudal Japan, a shadow that smells like pig dung and steamed barley. It wasn't supposed to be like this. You imagined your first mission as something elegant, something sharp, a clean strike in the moonlight perhaps, or maybe a secret rendezvous in a bamboo grove where your mere presence would cause rival spies to tremble and spill their secrets like overturned sake. Instead, you're elbow deep in a pig pen, crouching beneath a splintered feed trough while trying very hard not to sneeze. The pigs know you're here, you know they know, and if one more of them snorts in your general direction, you might just blow your entire cover and your nostrils in one explosive sneeze that echoes all the way back to the rice fields. This is your mission. Endure. Observe. Do not be seen. Do not sneeze. And most importantly, do not step in the part of the pen that steams. But let's rewind a bit. Because while you hold your breath and reconsider your career choices, it's important to understand why this is happening. In the Sengoku period, 1467 to 1615, Japan wasn't so much a unified country as it was an all-you-can-betray buffet of warring clans, each armed with swords, grudges, and a very strong incentive to know what their neighbours were planning. Enter the ninja, not as mystical assassins with vanishing powers, but as what they actually were: low status, highly trained intelligence operatives, and pigpen espionage, surprisingly common. Real ninjas weren't always infiltrating castles or battling samurai. Much of the job involved spying on lesser lords, merchants, or farmers who were suspected of aiding rival clans. This meant going where the people went: markets, fields, kitchens, temples, latrines, and yes, livestock pens. Animals made excellent cover. No one questions the stench of a pigsty. No one wants to investigate the suspiciously shaped hay pile, and in a time before electric surveillance, the best place to eavesdrop on two guards gossiping over pickled radish was often from beneath a wooden slat coated in years of fermented animal regrets. So here you are, disguised as a lowly farmer. Your breath is shallow, your clothes are soaked with something you hope is just mud, and your eyes are watering from the sheer potency of barnyard funk. You've been in this pen for 9 hours, and the information you're after? A single phrase, a name, a location, something muttered by a passing servant or a careless samurai on horseback who assumes the pigs can't understand human. They'd be right, about the pigs anyway. You, on the other hand, have trained for this. Months of silent breathing drills, hours crouched in stillness while your instructor tossed pebbles at your head for fidgeting. You've mastered the art of mokunagi, throwing silence. It's not glamorous, but it's useful when your greatest weapon is invisibility, and your greatest threat is a sneeze brought on by pig dander and fermented straw mould. Still, even with all your training, nothing could prepare you for what's crawling up your leg right now. You don't know what it is. You don't want to know, but it has too many legs and opinions about your shin. Historically, the romanticised notion of the ninja, the black-clad rooftop leaper, was a construct popularised during the Edo period, long after most active espionage had simmered down. Real ninjas were masters of misdirection, disguise, and patience. They didn't sprint across rooftops unless they absolutely had to. Most of the time, they were gathering intel, slowly, carefully, quietly. Often while being mistaken for something lowly and ignorable, like a mute stable hand or a man who really loves pigs. Even their tools were deceptively humble, no flashy katanas or magic smoke bombs here. You carried a sharpened sickle tucked under your robe, a small vial of ink for writing coded messages, and in your case, a rice ball stuffed with notes, and a mild sedative in case someone needed to accidentally fall asleep mid-monologue. But none of that matters if you blow your cover now. You're sweating. Not from fear, okay, maybe a little fear, but from the sheer physical strain of holding a crouch for this long. Your calves are vibrating. Your nose is twitching. A pig has just sat directly on your left foot and appears very committed to staying there. You start to hallucinate what failure might look like. A startled oink, a sudden shout, an arrow to the hay pile, and then your body, flung out of the pig pen by the force of a startled sow, and 4 days of malnutrition, crumpling in the courtyard as samurai rush in, confused by why a rice farmer is carrying poison ink and dried frog jerky. Number. You can't let that happen. You stare at a knot in the wooden plank ahead of you. You breathe through your mouth. You think about serene things, like falling snow, bamboo forests, and the fact that you've forgotten what your own bed smells like. Then, finally, voices. 2 men, talking, laughing. You strain your ears, filtering through the grunts of the pigs, the buzzing of flies, the occasional snort that sounds far too judgmental. And there it is, a name, a direction, the phrase you were sent to confirm. It's murmured like a throwaway joke, but it's the key your clan has been waiting for. You memorize it instantly, and then you wait 2 more hours, just to be safe. Because the golden rule of ninjutsu isn't bravery, it's not getting caught. You wait until the courtyard is clear, the pigs are drowsy, and the sun begins to dip low enough to cast long forgiving shadows. Then you slowly, painfully rise, gently dislodging the pig from your foot, and slip out of the pen with the speed of a man who's developed a deeply personal vendetta against livestock. Your first mission is complete. You stink, you ache, you itch in places you can't speak of, and yet, you made it. You return to your handler with your message intact and your cover unblown. They give you a nod. No parade, no praise, just another assignment and a bowl of lukewarm millet porridge. You eat it in silence. You don't complain, because you're a ninja now, and this is just the beginning. You would think, having survived your first mission with nothing but a few bruises, psychological trauma, and a new allergy to hay, that things would get easier. They do not. The pig pen wasn't an anomaly, it was a preview. See, being a ninja wasn't a temporary ordeal. It was a lifestyle of discomfort, wrapped in silence, tied with a straw rope, and lightly marinated in fear. Every moment after that first mission is a lesson in humility, improvisation, and creative hygiene avoidance. And yet, from a historical lens, your squalor is entirely authentic. The shinobi, especially those from the Iga and Koga regions, were recruited from lower social classes. These weren't pampered elites with time to master swordplay between tea ceremonies. These were farmers, blacksmiths and labourers who turned their practical skills into tools of espionage, digging irrigation ditches one day, digging tunnel networks into enemy castles the next. Your background as a humble nobody? Perfect cover. But life undercover meant never standing still. You couldn't afford to be known, even as a farmer. That meant changing villages regularly, modifying your gait, adopting accents, and practicing the ninja art of henso jutsu, the skill of disguise. It wasn't about theatrical costumes. It was about passing undetected by becoming exactly what others expected to ignore. And the best way to avoid being watched. Smell terrible. In fact, some ninja schools taught scent manipulation. If you smelled like you lived in a barn, no one assumed you were an infiltrator. They assumed you were just another peasant with poor life choices. This is why your clothes weren't cleaned often. This is why your last bath was during a rainstorm. This is why you developed a deep, abiding hatred for pigs and everything they represent. Back to your post-mission debrief. You hand off the information. You say nothing more than necessary. Your handler, A man who may or may not be your uncle, you're never quite sure, nods once and slides a scroll into a hidden compartment under the tatami mat. Then he hands you a new robe and tells you to walk west. No explanation. No time to heal. You walk for 3 days. You sleep in bamboo groves, eat what you can steal or trap, and develop an intense dislike for frogs. Mostly because you've had to eat 4 of them raw, and only 2 were willing participants. Eventually you arrive at a new village, where you're to pose as a mute carpenter. You know nothing about carpentry, but you do know how to hold a saw and nod politely. You build exactly 1 wooden bucket before you're sent back out into the fields, this time to spy on a tax official suspected of skimming silver from the local lord's coffers. How do you spy on him? You don't break into his house or shadow him like a ghost. You join the team that sweeps his floors. You sweep with gusto. You also listen to his servants, to passing messengers, to the official himself, who mutters insults under his breath about the Lord's terrible handwriting and his own cleverness at hiding money in places no blade will find, which is cryptic, unhelpful, and disgusting. Later that night, you sneak back into the estate disguised as a drunk beggar. You climb through a window, past a sleeping guard with a bowl of pickled plums on his chest, and discover a small wooden box beneath the official's mattress. Inside, silver coins wrapped in prayer papers, incriminating but not yet fatal. You report it. The official is quietly reassigned 2 weeks later. You're given a new assignment, this time involving a travelling priest, a suspicious number of dead horses, and a theatre troupe. You stop asking questions. Ninja work was rarely solitary. Clans coordinated. Messages were passed using encoded fans, flower arrangements, or knots tied in specific ways. If that failed, you used food. A rice ball could hold a note, a blade, or a fatal dose of belladonna, depending on the mission. You carry at least 1 on every outing. You don't eat it. You never eat it. Unless, of course, you forget which one is the real snack and which one is the do not eat unless you want to hallucinate your ancestor's wedding snack. This has happened. You once spent an entire afternoon weeping in a tree because the wind looked too judgmental. But even then you held your cover, because failure in ninja life was rarely theatrical. It didn't come with a battle. It came with a cough at the wrong moment, a footstep too loud, a rice ball eaten too soon, a sneeze in a pig pen. You've made it past that last one. You're stronger for it. And yet, as you squat in another dark corner weeks later, dressed as a blind incense seller and reciting the 14 documented reasons samurai might execute someone for mispronouncing their name, you can't help but long for that pig pen again. At least the pigs weren't armed. So if you're still awake, congratulations. You've survived your first real glimpse into the life of a real ninja. You now understand that ninjas weren't mythical warriors. They were human. Dirty, exhausted, brilliant humans who survived by making themselves invisible through smell, silence, and sheer force of will. And if that doesn't make you appreciate your clean sheets and unlocked bathroom door tonight, I don't know what will. Now lie still and do not sneeze, because someone might be listening. Forget everything you thought you knew about the iconic ninja outfit. The sleek black robe, the snug mask, the katana glinting in the moonlight, that headband with a symbol that probably means stealth, but actually just means noodles in bad calligraphy. Yeah, all lies, because tonight you're not being handed a blade or a suit of darkness. Number, you're handed a straw hat, a plain brown robe that smells like incense and mildew, and a shovel. And then you're told, today you're a wandering monk who gardens. No one says this ironically. You wait, expecting some kind of explanation, some secret message. Maybe the real outfit is underneath, a secret black layer with throwing stars sewn into the sleeves. Nope, the outfit is the mission. Welcome to the greatest ninja secret of all. Your uniform is a disguise pretending to be another disguise. Let's break the myth wide open. Historically, the image of ninjas dressed head to toe in black is more a product of kabuki theatre than battlefield reality. In kabuki, stagehands wore black to signal they weren't part of the scene. When a character was meant to appear invisible, they'd wear the same black, signalling to the audience, this person isn't here, until surprise. That aesthetic eventually bled into popular depictions of ninjas. It looked cool, it was mysterious, and it completely ignored the actual methods ninjas used to blend into feudal Japanese society. Because if you wore a full black outfit in daylight Japan, people wouldn't think, oh wow, that guy is stealthy. They'd think, that man is clearly trying to rob someone. Immediately. Instead, ninjas wore whatever helped them blend in. Monk robes, merchant garb, farmer clothes, even the attire of actors or pilgrims. The best camouflage wasn't darkness, it was expectation. If people expected to ignore you, you were safe. And nobody got ignored more than a wandering gardener with bad posture, which is exactly what you're pretending to be today. You sling the shovel over your shoulder, lower the straw hat to hide your eyes, and shuffle forward on sandaled feet that still haven't fully healed from that one time you had to walk barefoot across gravel blindfolded during training. You're headed to the estate of a minor noble suspected of hiding scrolls containing troop movements. The mission? Infiltrate. Locate the scroll, report back. You could go in as a thief. You could sneak in at night. But no. Today's strategy is slow infiltration. You'll blend into the background, pose as an itinerant monk seeking alms, and offer to tend the noble's gardens. You'll weed his radishes, compliment his azaleas, and if you're lucky, gain access to the inner courtyard where secrets tend to grow under bigger leaves. It's not glamorous, but that's the point. You pass the first checkpoint without so much as a glance. The guard waves you through. You're just another poor monk with a sunburn and questionable backstory. You bow low, mumble a made-up prayer under your breath, and walk through the gate. You're in. And the shovel, which looks harmless, is not just for show. Historically, ninja disguises weren't only about fashion, they were about function. A merchant's robe could hide tools, poison, or messages. A farmer's hoe could double as a weapon. A monk's staff might unscrew to reveal a hidden blade or a rolled scroll. Every item had to justify itself twice. Once to the casual observer, and once to the mission. The shovel you're carrying? The handle unscrews into two sections. One holds a coiled rope, the other a thin scroll case wrapped in oiled cloth. The edge is filed sharp enough to open a sealed letter or a throat, depending on the moment. And buried in the hem of your robe is a small pouch of powdered ink that reveals hidden messages when heated. But again, the goal is to never use any of it. If you're doing this right, no one ever suspects a thing. You spend the day crouching in the garden, muttering chants about balance and harmony, while casually taking note of which servants go where. You track foot patterns in the dirt, you count windows, you time guard rotations, all while pretending to admire a daikon. That evening, you're offered a bowl of rice and a place to sleep in the tool shed. Perfect. The shed is 3 walls and a leaky roof, but it's close enough to the main house that you can hear conversations through the paper walls. That night, while pretending to sleep, you hear exactly what you need. The noble is preparing to meet with another clan. He mentions scrolls. He mentions the inner shrine. He laughs about how no one would ever look in the altar. It's sacred, he jokes. You smile. Because sacred places are your specialty. You wake before dawn, or at least pretend to. Your disguise is still perfect. Robe rumpled, sandals dusty, a faint smell of moss and smoke to suggest long travel. You sip weak tea with the gardeners, nod sagely at small talk about weeds, and blend in like you've always been there. You're not the centre of attention. You're not even part of the attention, which means you're doing it right. After breakfast, you volunteer to sweep the shrine. The guards glance at each other and shrug. You're just a monk. Who else should do it? Sacred space needs sacred hands. And besides, You already smell like incense and rice water. No one would suspect the sweaty, bowing gardener of anything more than extreme humility. Inside the shrine you move slowly, reverently, eyes down, posture curved, but your brain is doing laps, calculating angles, weighing risks, tracking the presence of every possible witness. You whisper a fake prayer, lift the wooden altar, and there it is, a scroll tube, wrapped in red twine, the symbol of Clan Ryu, hidden where only faith or espionage would think to look. You don't touch it, not yet. That's not your job. You verify its existence, commit every marking to memory, and then, casually, spill a small pouch of offering rice. As you sweep it up, you plant a marker, a single coin, half buried, facing east, a signal to the next operative that the scroll is present and confirmed, and then you leave, just like that. No confrontation, no weapons drawn, no dramatic escape. You bow, thank your host, and walk away like the humble dirt-worshipping gardener you are. Because that's the genius of the disguise. It doesn't just hide you, it rewrites you. Historically, this kind of long-term infiltration was common among shinobi. In fact, many of the most effective agents weren't trained killers at all. They were trained impersonators. The ninja clans of Iga and Koga, for instance, specialized in such techniques. Disguise was considered one of the essential disciplines of ninjutsu, listed in manuals like the Bansen Shukai, which detailed dozens of cover identities from umbrella sellers to Buddhist pilgrims. Some disguises even stacked, like a ninja posing as a merchant pretending to be a monk. A disguise of a disguise. Each layer increased your plausible deniability and lowered the chance of detection. And the more boring your cover, the safer you were. A flamboyant actor was suspicious. A dusty sandal repairman. Invisible. You once wore the same disguise for 6 months. You lived in a fishing village, caught actual fish, paid fake taxes, and helped build a well, all for one opportunity to deliver a single coded message to a passing pilgrim. The moment it was done, you left in the night and never returned. The villagers never even knew they'd housed a ghost. Because that's what you are, a ghost wrapped in straw and sweat. You report back to your handler. This one is disguised as a sake brewer with a lazy eye. He pours you a drink, asks no questions, and nods as you describe the scroll's position, contents, and security. You leave out the part where you briefly cried into your sleeve from sheer adrenal fatigue. That part isn't useful. He hands you a new robe. It's thicker, smells like miso. "Farmer," he says. "Southern province, turnip season." You nod, because your next disguise is already beginning, and with it, the training resumes. You'll spend the next week perfecting the gait of a peasant with a sore hip. You'll learn how to pack turnips in a way that hides a small blade. You'll study the dialect of a region you've never seen, memorize local temple names, and fake a callus on your left palm to match your new character's shovel habits. You'll be someone else. Again. Because being a ninja isn't about fighting, it's about forgetting. Forgetting who you are, what you need, and why you ever thought this life would be cool in the first place. You're underground again, because of course you are. You've crawled through gardens, slept in shrines, disguised yourself as everything from a mute tofu vendor to a blind incense peddler with a suspicious number of bruises. But this is a new low. Literally. You're lying face up in a narrow dirt-lined tunnel under a tea house latrine. The ceiling is 2 inches from your nose. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth, fermented wood, and something else you've stopped trying to identify. It's warm, not pleasantly warm, clammy, mouldy warm. Your knees are pressed against your chest. Your elbow is touching something slimy that definitely wasn't there yesterday. And every now and then someone uses the latrine above you. When they do, you hold your breath. Not for stealth, for survival. This is your mission. You're stationed beneath a meeting place used by low-ranking officials loyal to a rival clan. The idea is simple. Stay silent, stay hidden, and listen. Memorize everything. Wait for the target phrase, a specific name or troop location, then leave unseen, unheard, and unsmelled. You haven't moved in 3 days. You have, however, developed a remarkable tolerance for boredom, discomfort, and the quiet panic that comes from realizing you are, once again, sharing your surveillance hole with something that breathes. Historically, ninja tunnel systems were no fantasy. Both the Iga and Koga regions, the heartlands of shinobi activity, made use of underground passageways for surveillance, escape, and surprise infiltration. Castles often had hidden crawl spaces or subfloor compartments that allowed eavesdropping on conversations above. These weren't spacious corridors, they were pits, trenches, human-sized badger holes reinforced with bamboo and desperation. Some ninja manuals even offered architectural suggestions for underground chambers, recommending layers of oiled cloth and powdered charcoal to muffle sound and reduce smell. Two luxuries you, unfortunately, have not been provided. You shift slightly to relieve the cramp in your left foot, only to bump into something soft. It wiggles. You both freeze. It stops. You don't investigate. You've learned a valuable truth. If the creature in the tunnel doesn't try to kill you immediately, you're roommates now. You pass the time by chewing dried burdock root, reciting plant poisons in your head, and trying not to think about the humidity slowly seeping into your eyebrows. Above you, life continues. Teacups clinking, sandals scraping, voices muttering. You've memorized the vocal cadence of 4 different bureaucrats and are beginning to track which one eats the most daikon. It's the loud one with the wheeze. Occasionally the conversation flares with something useful. Troop counts, schedule changes, a suspicious shipment of temple incense with no scent. You log it all. You hold it tight in your brain like a scroll you're afraid to lose, and still you wait. Because ninjas weren't assassins by default. They were observers. Assassination was flashy. It burned bridges. What you're doing is more dangerous. Listening, memorizing, disappearing. That's what got you sent here. Not your strength, not your speed, but your ability to be nobody. It takes discipline. You've been trained to slow your breath, slow your pulse. You've even been taught to stop blinking for extended periods. A talent you recently discovered is less impressive when you're also battling eye gunk from low-grade tunnel mildew. On the second night, a centipede climbs up your sleeve. You don't flinch. You name it Kenji and give it a quiet warning not to betray you. It leaves. You respect that. Your rations consist of a single rice ball, 2 strips of dried persimmon, and a small ceramic vial of rainwater with a pebble in it to prevent sloshing. You eat in silence, slowly, chewing each bite until it dissolves, not because it's a spiritual practice, because any noise might echo through the floorboards. You haven't spoken in days, and it's not just a mission, it's policy. Historically, shinobi missions were often solo and speechless. Speaking aloud could compromise identity. In some cases, even thinking in full sentences was discouraged. Ninja scrolls like the Ninpidon emphasized clearing the mind to avoid panic, focusing instead on formless intent. So you think in fragments, not "I am hungry", just "food". Later, quiet now. Not "I wonder if this hole has rats", just squeak, hide, ignore. Not "Why am I here?" Well, that one never really goes away. On the morning of the 4th day, a voice above you mutters something different, a name you recognize, a plan you weren't supposed to hear. It's short, half mumbled and immediately brushed off, but you catch it. You remember it, and now your exit must begin. But this isn't the kind of mission where you burst dramatically from the ground in a swirl of smoke. That's theatre. You back out, inch by inch, through the narrow dirt tunnel you crawled in on. You feel every root, every stone, every emotional scar along the way. Your limbs are trembling, not from fear, from the sheer muscular atrophy of crouching in a space built for someone with fewer bones. Halfway through the tunnel, your foot brushes Kenji again. He doesn't respond. You assume he's on his own mission now. Good luck, comrade. When you finally emerge, in a ditch behind the outer wall, the fresh air hits your lungs like vinegar. You don't gasp, you just breathe. Slowly. Precisely. Like someone still playing a role, even though the performance is over. Because technically, it never really ends. You brush the dirt from your robe, check your notes, and begin walking. The journey back to your handler takes 2 days. You pass through 2 villages dressed as a wandering paper seller. You sell exactly 0 paper, but you learn the local gossip. Rumours of war, a farmer who claims to have seen a ghost, a child who found a sandal in a tree and swears it belonged to a monk who could fly. You keep your head down. When you arrive, your handler doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. You nod, hand him the tiny scroll where you've written your findings using ink made from charred bamboo and boiled tea. He reads it, grunts, and hands you a folded robe that smells like fish guts. Next one's coastal, he says. You take the robe, you don't ask questions, because this is what it means to vanish. You live in holes, you live in lies, you live in borrowed clothes and unfinished thoughts, and just when you resurface, just when you begin to feel like a person again, someone hands you a new disguise and you vanish all over again. You were promised danger. You expected weapons, blades, smoke, maybe even the occasional acrobatic escape through a thatched roof. What you didn't expect was rice. Cold rice. Compact, bland, and currently sweating slightly in your palm. This, they tell you, is your most important tool. Not a sword, not a hidden needle, a rice ball. You stare at it, waiting for the trick. Maybe it's explosive. Maybe there's a blade inside. Maybe, please, it's just lunch. But your handler squints and says, "Do not eat it." Of course not. That would be logical, nourishing even. But no, this is no ordinary snack. It's a message capsule, a secret communique, a pillow for secrets, a lie wrapped in starch. Inside that clump of vinegared rice is a folded slip of paper, inked with a message so sensitive they wouldn't even let you read it. You're the delivery mechanism, congratulations. You're now Ninja FedEx. Historically, ninjas were masters of covert communication. When you couldn't trust people, you trusted food. Secret messages were often tucked inside dumplings, rice cakes, or even hollowed out pickled plums. Anything innocuous enough to pass unnoticed by guards or suspicion. The idea was simple. If you needed to pass a message through a checkpoint, nobody frisked your lunch. And if someone got hungry, well, hopefully they weren't literate. The ink used inside the rice ball, likely made from a natural blend of soot, pine resin and animal glue, waterproofed using fish oil. The paper? Thin, fibrous washi, light enough to fold, tough enough to survive chewing if things went very wrong. Some agents were even trained to swallow the message whole, recover it later, and reassemble it using tweezers and poor life choices. Your job tonight? Deliver the rice ball. Don't get stopped. Don't get hungry. Don't drop it. Simple enough. Until you realise it's a 2-day walk, uphill, during a local food shortage, and you skipped breakfast. You begin the journey disguised as a travelling street performer. This means you wear bells on your ankle, carry a biwa you can't play, and pretend to be part blind and mostly insane. It's one of your more popular personas. Nobody bothers someone who might burst into song or spontaneous weeping. By sundown, you've passed 2 patrols. One of them asked what you were carrying. You answered, "The pain of existence," and one very holy rice ball. They laughed. You bowed. The rice ball survived. You sleep in a field that night, under the gaze of 2 owls and something with a disturbingly human-sounding cough in the bushes. You do not eat the rice ball. You do not look at the message, but you do whisper threats to it in the dark, just to let it know who's in charge. By morning, your hunger is starting to erode your professionalism. You fantasize about biting just one corner. You promise yourself it'll just be the edge. You'd repack the message. You'd cover your tracks. You'd replace it with another rice ball. No one would know. Except they would. You'd know. And so would your clan. And eventually your handler, who would find the message slightly soggy and mysteriously rice-scented. You picture the disappointed sigh, the judgmental eyebrow raise, the sharp reprimand involving a stick and your kneecaps. You sigh and continue walking. The historical reality of a ninja's tools was far more utilitarian and far more food-based than most fiction admits. Popular lore gives you swords and shuriken. Reality gives you kui, the specialized food supply of a shinobi on mission. Kui included portable, durable rations, balls of crushed rice, roasted grains, miso paste, and even hoshiuo, dried fish powdered with salt and vinegar for long storage. In addition to these, you carried tools like collapsible bamboo poles, waxed string, and small vials of oil or soot. But the most important item, information. That's what missions were built on. A single name, a coded number, a symbol drawn in 3 strokes. All of it folded into a rice ball and expected to survive travel, temperature shifts, and the occasional squirrel attack. You pass another checkpoint. This time, they ask for food. Your heart thuds. You hold up the rice ball solemnly and say, "This was blessed by a wandering priest to cure my recurring dreams about frogs." They wave you through. You're not sure if you just passed a test or gained a reputation as someone cursed by amphibians. Either way, it works. By nightfall, you arrive at the meeting point, an abandoned bell tower just outside the village. You're early. That's good. You scan the surroundings. 3 exits. No recent footprints. 1 faint trail of smoke from a cook fire long cooled. The contact should arrive at midnight. Until then, you wait. You do not eat the rice ball. You want to. You hate it now. Not because it's cold or damp, but because it's become a symbol of everything wrong with your life. The hunger, the paranoia, the fact that your only companion is a clump of rice with better job security than you. When the contact finally arrives, silent, gloved, cloaked in shadows, you recognize the signal. A knotted cord looped twice around the wrist, with a red bead near the thumb. You offer the rice ball with both hands and they take it, nod, vanish. Just like that. Mission complete. You should feel relief. Instead, you feel lighter, hungrier. You stare at your now empty palm. You whisper a quiet curse. You are finally free of the burden of that rice ball. And yet, in your heart, you know the worst is coming. Because your handler will want a report. He will ask, "Did you peek?" He will ask, "Did you eat it?" He will ask, "Did you get followed?" And he will ask all of this while handing you another rice ball, somehow already sweating in the humidity, with a fresh slip of paper hidden inside. The cycle begins again. The greatest irony of ninja life isn't the danger, it's the absurdity. You train for years in climbing walls, fighting in the dark, resisting torture, and then spend most of your time impersonating travelling musicians, carrying forged letters, or dodging questions about your peculiar snack preferences. Because ultimately, ninjas weren't warriors in the conventional sense, they were operatives, messengers, informants, archivists, saboteurs. Their job was to move information, not through magic or martial prowess, but through unremarkable, almost comedic persistence. They survived by being overlooked, and tonight your success is measured not in lives taken, but in 1 rice ball delivered intact. Your next mission. Same drill, different town, another rice ball. This one smells slightly of sesame and resentment. The bamboo stick cracks across your shin before your brain even registers the thunder. You don't cry out. That's the point. You're walking blindfolded across a bed of gravel, barefoot, in the rain. while your instructor waits in silence to punish any sound with swift wooden vengeance. You're not on a mission. You're not even pretending to be a monk or a rice vendor or a disgruntled tofu seller. You're at training camp again, and tonight's lesson is the art of step without sound. Which sounds poetic until you realise it's mostly just pain, posture, and desperately trying not to wince while your skin gets peeled by rocks and your dignity leaks out your ears. The technique is called shinobi aruki, literally stealth walking. It's a real thing, and it was absolutely central to actual ninja training. Despite modern stereotypes about explosive acrobatics and sword fights on rooftops, real ninjas survived not by killing loudly, but by moving silently. And not just quietly, not I wear soft shoes quietly. Number this was move across broken gravel in total darkness while blindfolded and rained on, and don't make a sound or you get whacked with a stick quietly. Historically, ninja manuals like the Shoninki and the Bansen Shukai describe stealth walking in incredible detail. You learn to roll your feet from the outer edge to the inner ball. You moved with knees bent, hips low, arms slightly raised for balance. You timed your breaths with footsteps, kept your soles dry for grip, and learned how to detect creaks in wooden floors by subtle shifts in texture and pressure. This wasn't theatrical, it was survival, and tonight it's your personal hell. The rain doesn't help. It makes the gravel slippery. It makes the blindfold heavy. It amplifies the noise of every rock shift, every breath, every tiny betrayal of sound your body dares to make. Thunder cracks again. Your heart jumps, but your feet don't. That's progress. You've been at it for 2 hours. The field is short, only 20 steps across, but it might as well be a mountain range of caltrops. Your instructor stands at the far end, holding the bamboo rod like a promise. If you step too loudly, he strikes. If you hesitate, he strikes. If you look like you might think about stepping incorrectly and you guessed it, strike. You've been struck 47 times tonight. You're counting. Not out of spite, out of habit. Because tracking pain helps distract you from the fact that your toes are now vaguely shaped like gravel, and you may never walk like a normal rice merchant again. You inch forward. Your left foot rolls carefully along the stones, brushing each one for texture. You shift your weight low, letting your knee guide the movement. You plant the ball of your foot. No crunch, no scrape. You hold your breath and let the wind fill the silence. Then you move your right. It's meditative, monastic, horrifying. The blindfold forces you to focus on every micromotion. You hear the wind curl through the bamboo above. You smell the distant smoke of a training fire. You taste your own adrenaline, which now tastes like dirt and poor life choices. By the 3rd hour, the pain dulls. You lose feeling in the arches of your feet. You forget what comfort is. You become movement itself. Cautious, deliberate, mildly damp movement. Your instructor doesn't strike. Not yet. That's almost worse. The anticipation stretches across your back like a drawn bow. You've walked 17 steps. 3 to go. Let's pause for a historical truth bomb. Ninjas practiced these drills constantly. Silent movement wasn't an exotic technique, it was foundational. Not just on gravel, but on floorboards, paper mats, rooftops, even straw and thatch. Entire buildings were mapped by creak pattern. Feet were trained like surgical tools. It wasn't just about not being heard, it was about making others noisy by comparison. If you could move like the wind and make your enemies stumble like drunk deer, you held power. And yes, blindfold training was also a thing. Why? Because many infiltration missions happened at night or underground with zero visibility. Your senses had to compensate. Touch, smell, hearing, all trained to levels that bordered on the supernatural. But they weren't. They were just the result of pain, repetition, and discipline. Which brings us to your next step. You lift your right foot. You feel the gravel shift, just slightly, beneath your heel. A single pebble rolls. You freeze. Nothing happens. You plant the foot. No strike. You're at step 18. Step 19. The wind shifts. You catch a new smell. Sake? From the east. Someone celebrating tonight. Must be nice. Step 20. Silence. And then, a single tap on your shoulder. The bamboo rod. Light. Almost affectionate. Training complete. You lower the blindfold. Your instructor nods. Says nothing. Walks away. You stand in the rain. Barefoot. Bleeding. Soaked. And silently victorious. You want to cry. You want to eat 400 rice balls and never see gravel again. But instead, you bow. Because pain is temporary, but silence is forever. Back in the training quarters, someone hands you a towel. Another hands you a scroll, tonight's lesson log, recorded in crude drawings and someone's bad handwriting. It reads, progress acceptable, noise index reduced, right shin, bruised but promising. You eat miso soup with your left hand because your right one is too swollen to hold chopsticks. Across the room, someone else is being blindfolded. The instructor waits, bamboo raised, rain still falling. Your turn will come again, maybe tomorrow, maybe in an hour. The gravel waits for no one. And the art of shinobiaruki, it never ends. Your next mission may not involve walking across rocks in a storm, but if it does, at least this time, you won't get caught before step 10. You were promised a mission, something heroic, maybe even dramatic. Instead, you've been handed a brush, a scroll, and a basket full of withering plants, and told, you have until dawn to memorize them all, and which ones make people vomit. You look at the scroll, you look at the plants, you look at your instructor. He walks away, and now you're sitting knee-deep in a swamp, rain slowly soaking your scalp, reciting the Japanese names for plants that can kill a man in a bowl of soup, or cure a toothache depending on whether you boil them for 3 minutes or 4. Welcome to Poison Memorization Night. It's part flashcards, part survival horror, and completely mandatory. Here's the historical truth. Real ninjas were not just fighters, they were pharmacologists. Amateurs maybe. Improvisers, definitely. But when your survival depends on knowing the difference between aconite and wild ginger, you'd better know your herbs. The ninja's knowledge of kusuri jutsu, the art of medicine and poisons, wasn't optional. It was foundational. You were expected to know how to kill, incapacitate, or merely annoy, using only what you could find in a forest, steal from a merchant, or grow in a mouldy jar under your cot. You studied toxins like datura, a hallucinogenic flower that could make a man walk off a cliff while thanking you for the view. Monkshood, elegant, purple, and completely unromantic once it paralysed your diaphragm. Hemlock, bitter, ancient, and reliable enough to end a conversation permanently. Camphor, used in low doses to stimulate, in high doses to never stimulate again. And you didn't just memorise what they looked like. You memorised how they changed by season, how their toxicity shifted with soil, how to extract just enough to cause confusion, or just enough to ruin someone's trousers. You also memorised the antidotes, and how to fake antidotes, and how to survive in case someone mixed your antidote with something unpleasant, like powdered glass or irony. Back to the swamp. Your study guide is an ancient scroll inked with vague sketches and riddled with contradictory advice. One passage tells you that a certain root causes seizures if eaten raw. Another says it's great in stew. A third claims the plant doesn't even exist anymore. You cross-reference everything with what's in your basket. Half of it's rotting. One of the plants is moving, you don't question that. The first one, dokudami, heartleaf, smells like old fish and healing, used as an anti-inflammatory, a diuretic, and, when concentrated enough, a reason to avoid soup for a month. You taste it. Because of course you do. That's part of the training. Not swallowing, just tasting, identifying. You're meant to become so familiar with flavour, texture, and afterburn that you could detect a single leaf mixed into a bowl of barley. You're tongue-tied and a nosebleed. The next plant, Negi, looks like scallion, tastes like scallion, is scallion. You make a note. Not deadly. You eat it anyway. It's the only thing in the basket you trust. The third, Nagari, bitter melon. You chew, immediately regret it, and decide death by poison might be better than another bite. You continue. At some point, someone dumps a fresh pile of plants in front of you and grunts, "Mid-season variants." You blink. The pile is twice the size of your torso. There are roots with hair, leaves with spikes, berries that look delicious and will absolutely kill you if eaten with dairy. There's moss and bark, and a flower that smells like mint but will cause hallucinations of your ancestors playing board games. The rain picks up. You keep working. Because failure tonight means one of two things. You get sent into the field without knowing the difference between cure and career-ending diarrhea. You poison yourself while trying to poison someone else. And while historically ironic, that's not the kind of legacy you want. Ninja manuals emphasized memorization under stress. You weren't supposed to learn these things in a quiet garden with a cup of tea. You learned them in the dark, cold, and wet. Your brain needed to work through fog, fear, and fatigue. Some instructors even trained you to recite plant names during punishment drills, push-ups in the mud, rope climbs with weighted baskets, or wall squats while holding hot stones. If you forgot which plant made you drool uncontrollably, you got to experience the answer. You once watched a trainee pass out during a lecture on oleander. When he woke up, he remembered the plant's properties perfectly. Trauma is a fantastic mnemonic device. You're halfway through the basket when you spot something familiar, a tiny sprig of shiso, the perilla leaf. You smile. Shiso is your friend. It's edible, safe, tasty even. You tuck it behind your ear like a crown and name it Shiso the Merciful. You decide it will be your poison spirit guide. It lasts 4 minutes before blowing off in the wind. You never see Shiso again. By the 5th hour, the plants start blending together. You look at a root and whisper 4 different names. Your notes devolve into drawings. Your drawings devolve into rage scribbles. You think you hear your instructor laughing from a tree branch. He might not even be there. You might just be hallucinating from all the microdoses. But you're still going. You chew a stem. Bitter, sharp, eye-watering. You blink the tears away and murmur, hydrangea. Hemolytic when boiled. Safe in tea only if dried for 12 days. You don't know if that's true anymore, but it sounds authoritative. That's half the battle. Just before dawn, your instructor returns. He asks one question. Which plant makes a man speak nonsense and lose his pants? You answer without thinking. Crushed seeds of belladonna steeped in plum vinegar. He nods. Then he tosses you a rice ball and walks away. You chew slowly. The rice tastes like victory and mould. Then your next assignment arrives. Transcribe the 400 plants from memory, without the scroll, before noon. You don't cry. Your tear ducts are too clogged with powdered chrysanthemum. You pick up the brush, dip it in ink, and begin again. You've trained your whole life to disappear, to melt into the background, to master the art of quietude so profound that even your breath forgets you exist. You've walked barefoot across gravel in the rain, memorized the scent of over 400 poisonous plants, and survived a week living in a tunnel beneath a latrine. You know silence. You respect silence. You are silence. And apparently that's a problem, because this morning a farmer hit you with a turnip. You hadn't spoken. You hadn't moved, strangely. You'd simply wandered into the village as instructed. Barefoot, bowed low, face partially obscured by a straw hat. A travelling mute. A beggar. A harmless shadow of a man. The perfect cover, you were told. The villagers would overlook you. You'd gather intel quietly. A ghost among the rice paddies. Instead, you were labelled a cursed spirit within the hour. It began with whispers. Children pointed. One elderly woman crossed herself 3 times and spat on the road behind you. Someone muttered about a demon who steals voices. Someone else mentioned a monk who once turned into a fox. Then came the turnip, large, overripe, and alarmingly well aimed. That was the beginning of your exorcism by peer pressure. By sundown, you were running through fields while being pelted with root vegetables, accused of everything from sorcery to cabbage blight. A goat followed you for a full mile, either out of concern or solidarity. You didn't have time to ask. You'd been chased out not for being suspiciously loud, but for being suspiciously quiet. In hindsight, you probably should have said something. But silence is hard to turn off once you've been trained in it. Real ninja training doesn't just teach you to stop making noise, it teaches you to remove presence. You learn to suppress your own breath, to still your pulse, to let your gaze unfocus and your weight vanish into the earth. You practiced walking in a way that your feet never fully committed to the ground. You learn to swallow reflexes, to make your existence optional. And in every dojo, in every secret scroll, you were told that this was the goal. True invisibility wasn't magic, it was mundane perfection. What they didn't teach you was how unnerving that becomes in a place where people know their neighbors. In rural Japan, during the Edo and late Sengoku periods, village life was intimate. Everyone recognized each other. Everyone noticed strangers. And if that stranger showed up silent, expressionless, and wearing a hat low enough to obscure their soul, well, that wasn't a peasant. That was a yokai in disguise. Superstition wasn't decoration in these villages. It was law, culture, and survival strategy. Folklore was the operating system of the community. If your presence reminded people of a ghost, a fox spirit, or a cursed mountain hermit, you weren't mysterious. You were an emergency. And emergencies were expelled with prejudice and produce. You learnt that the hard way. It was supposed to be a 3-day surveillance mission. Track the merchant, note his routine, determine whether he was carrying coded messages sewn into the seams of his robe. You were to observe only, blend in, maybe help with the harvest to earn trust. Instead, you spent day 1 being force-fed rice wine by a paranoid farmer trying to free the demon, and day 2 pretending you enjoyed being called the Whispering Man by children who definitely weren't sleeping that night. You never made it to day 3. After the turnip riot, you fled into the forest. You didn't return to camp, you didn't light a fire. You simply lay beneath a tree and stared at the canopy, rethinking your entire training. You were silent. You were disciplined. You were perfect. And none of that mattered when the locals decided you were possessed. The irony isn't lost on you. You're not angry, mostly just hungry, and slightly concussed from the pumpkin. By the second night, you're back on the road. Your disguise is gone, or rather, it's been shredded by suspicion and cabbage. You travel as yourself now, not openly, not carelessly, but with a bit more noise in your step. You cough occasionally, hum to yourself in a way that suggests mild lunacy, which is oddly less threatening than silence. At the next village, you buy a rice ball and compliment the vendor's hair. It's awkward. The man laughs nervously but doesn't throw anything. Progress. You're learning painfully that your training, while flawless in theory, does not always translate to human spaces. Real people don't respond well to ghosts, and in a world where yokai are blamed for storms, sickness, and that one cow that won't produce milk, your blank stare and hushed presence are not assets. They're omens. Your handler isn't sympathetic. When you report back, still smelling faintly of garlic and humiliation, he hands you a new mission scroll and mutters something about tone adjustments. You ask what that means. He shrugs and says, "Try not to be so invisible next time." You want to argue that invisibility was the whole point. Instead, you nod. The scroll is sealed with wax and smells faintly of pickled plum. That's code for an urban mission. Bigger crowds, more noise, less superstition. The odds of being mistaken for a haunted radish farmer drop dramatically. You feel relief, then guilt, then hunger. At dusk, you sit by the river, eating the rice ball you never got to deliver 2 weeks ago. It's stale, but edible. You chew slowly, watching the current, replaying the village scene in your mind. You could have handled it better. Maybe spoken up. Maybe smiled. Maybe not stood motionless under the same tree for 6 hours like a judgmental owl. It's a strange thing, realizing that your skills, once so carefully honed, can also be a liability. That silence, when taken too far, becomes suspicious. That subtlety, when misapplied, looks like a curse. You train to be unseen. But sometimes, being seen, just a little, is what keeps you alive. Tomorrow you'll practice being slightly louder. Not careless, not obvious, just visible enough to not be accused of being an ancient woodland spirit seeking vengeance for an unwatered bonsai. And if that fails, you'll bring a backup disguise, one with bells, just in case. You're crouched under a tree, soaked from an unexpected downpour and mildly vibrating from adrenaline. Your last mission went sideways, again. But you made it out. Barely. You didn't get stabbed. You didn't get caught. You didn't even sneeze in the wrong direction, which frankly is progress. What you did do was run for 3 straight miles through a ravine, climb a wall with one sandal, and then spend 20 minutes trying to convince a crow to stop screaming in your general direction. You're alive, you're alone, you're exhausted, and now it's time for the worst part of any ninja mission: dinner. You unhook your ration pouch from your belt. It's small, fabric wrapped, and very light, which, in ninja logic, is a good thing. Less weight means faster movement, fewer traces, and nothing clinking together to betray your location. But it also means no joy, because the moment you open it, that familiar disappointment wafts out like a threat. This isn't food. This is punishment that happens to be chewable. Inside the pouch are 2 dried frogs, flattened and salt-cured to the texture of old paper fans. There's a pinch of barley dust wrapped in wax paper. There are 3 small pebbles, which you've been explicitly told are not for eating but for sucking on when your body forgets how to make saliva. And finally, a puck of something brownish green that smells vaguely of smoke, vinegar, and sadness. You assume it used to be a turnip. You hope it used to be a turnip, but this is your entire meal. And it's historically accurate. Ninja rations, known collectively as kui, were never designed to be satisfying. They were meant to keep you alive, silent, mobile, and invisible. The goal wasn't pleasure. The goal was function. Manuals like the Bansen Shukai laid out detailed plans for shinobi nutrition, and none of them included comfort as a category. Food was meant to be preserved, odorless, easy to carry, and eaten in silence, ideally with one hand in the dark while hiding inside a hollowed-out tree trunk filled with moss and regret. The most infamous of these survival foods was something called hyoragan, or ration pills. These were small, dense balls of energy packed with roasted grain, fermented root, and whatever protein could be obtained and disguised as medicine. They were meant to be swallowed, not chewed. Chewing made noise. Chewing meant death. And if you were lucky enough to be issued the deluxe ration, Kakatsugan, you got an even denser mix, often involving poppy seeds, ginseng, and trace amounts of opium for both stamina and the comforting hallucination that your life wasn't, in fact, a series of damp near-death experiences punctuated by frog jerky. You take a bite of one dried frog. It crunches like it's trying to escape your teeth. The texture is somewhere between roof tile and regret. You chew slowly, staring at the tree line, trying not to gag. The salt helps. Barely. You've eaten worse, you remind yourself. There was that one time with the pickled egg that turned out to be a stone, and the other time you mistook poison testing night for a snack break. But the frogs never get easier. They just get drier. After the frog, you down the barley dust. It sticks to the inside of your mouth like panic. Your tongue feels like it's been rolled in chalk. You reach for a pebble, your last one, and pop it between your cheek and molar like candy for people who've lost the will to live. It helps stimulate your salivary glands, which helps you swallow, which helps you avoid choking, which helps you survive just long enough to question every decision that led you here. You save the mysterious turnip puck for last. It's sour, dense, and tastes like it's been fermented in someone's boot. You chew once, twice, then stop chewing. It's safer that way. There's a reason ninja food was so unpleasant. The ideal ninja meal couldn't smell, not during storage, not after cooking, not even after being sweated out through your pores. Garlic? Too strong. Pickled fish? Too obvious. Even rice had to be prepared carefully. Some rations were toasted until nearly burned, then ground into powder to avoid scent trails. Others were wrapped in mulberry leaves to disguise the odour. If someone could track you by scent, your food had already betrayed you. You learned to eat like a mouse in a temple. Small, cautious bites. No chewing unless necessary. No sound, no mess, no waste. Some missions called for days without cooking. Fire was a luxury. Meals happened cold, in hiding, often in complete darkness. If you dropped your last rice pill into a puddle, that was your problem. If your food got mouldy, you scraped off the mould. If you lost your pouch, you foraged. And if what you foraged turned out to be a mildly hallucinogenic leaf that made you think you were a goose for 4 hours, well, that was considered valuable field learning. You finish the meal slowly, drawing it out more for the sake of routine than nourishment. Your stomach growls in protest. You don't respond. Complaining won't grow rice. You lean back against the tree listening to the rustle of night birds. Somewhere out there a patrol is moving. Somewhere else your next contact waits for a signal. You still have a job to do, but for now you let the frog settle. You roll the last pebble around your mouth like a bitter lozenge of resolve. The worst part of being a ninja isn't the hunger, it's knowing that when the mission ends there's no feast waiting, no warm fire, no stew pot bubbling with meat and miso, just another scroll, another disguise, another swampy field with a pouch of edible shame. And somewhere in the bottom of your soul a voice whispers, "You should have just been a rice merchant." But rice merchants don't get to vanish into the dark. You do, which means, for now, you live, pebbles and all. You're lying motionless on a bamboo mat inside a borrowed storage hut, wrapped in a tattered quilt stuffed with straw and old regrets. It's late, the fire outside has gone out, and the house is quiet. You should be sleeping, but instead, you're rehearsing your scream. Not a scream of pain, not terror, certainly not surprise. This is a scream of madness, a carefully practiced, methodically delivered shriek meant to startle your enemies, rattle superstitious minds, and make anyone nearby wonder whether a spirit has taken hold of your body. You do this, they've told you, so people will stay away, so your cover remains intact, so you can buy another night of safety in a room that doesn't belong to you. So of course you're pretending to have night terrors, on purpose. The scroll that assigned this technique called it Kyo-mei, or simulated spiritual possession. The village calls it that cursed monk who screams into his rice pillow at 3 a.m. Either way, you've become something between a tactical haunting and a human raccoon, and it's working. Sort of. Feigned insanity was a documented tactic in the Shinobi playbook. Ninja manuals like the Shoninki and Bansen Shukai mention the use of behavioral manipulation to deter suspicion, playing drunk, playing lost, playing mad. Because the truth was simple, no one wanted to deal with crazy, especially in rural Edo period Japan, where superstition dripped from every thatched rooftop and yokai lore was baked into the cultural wallpaper. A person who screamed in their sleep might be possessed. A person who wandered town muttering to themselves might be a spirit. Better to leave them alone. And that was exactly the point. Your first attempt was clumsy. too loud, too sudden. You scared yourself more than anyone else, jerking awake with a gasp and nearly biting your tongue. You spent the next hour pretending to be deeply unconscious while an old man threw grains of rice at your door to keep your demons at bay. You wanted to explain that the real demon was your training, but you couldn't break character. By night 3, you had refined the technique. You moaned low, escalating in volume and tone like a ghost climbing a haunted ladder. You thrashed once, kicked over a basket of onions, then fell completely still. When you opened your eyes, you saw no one. You'd heard no movement. You assumed it worked. By night 5, it became a routine. Fake sleep, shallow breathing, wait for silence, then moan. Just enough to be creepy. Just enough to keep people away. Then silence again. You're a ninja. But right now, you're also performance art. The absurdity of this isn't lost on you. You trained for years to master the art of stealth, subterfuge, combat, and endurance. You've memorized plant poisons, scaled castle walls, and slept in holes beneath latrines. You can blend into crowds and vanish into forests. And here you are, lying on your back, rehearsing the pacing of a haunted moan like an actor prepping for community kabuki. But it works. No one comes near your hut. No one questions the quiet man with sunken eyes and twitchy shoulders. They assume something's wrong, spiritually, mentally, perhaps cosmically. And that's all the cover you need to remain undisturbed. You remember a lecture during training where your instructor said, "Sometimes the best disguise is the one people actively avoid." At the time, you thought it meant act poor or act boring. You didn't think it meant simulate demonic possession with convincing upper chest vibrations. And yet, here you are. Feigned madness wasn't just about safety. It was also used to disrupt enemy morale. If you could infiltrate a village or compound and convince people they were cursed, haunted, or stalked by a ghost, they would be more likely to flee, panic, or make mistakes. A shinobi who cried in the night could unravel discipline. A spy who wandered the village whispering it's already inside could shake even seasoned guards. You've heard stories of operatives who faked seizures in crowded markets, spouted nonsense about invisible fire demons, or claimed to speak with the ancestors through cabbages, and all of them survived because no one wanted to fight someone they couldn't explain. Madness was camouflage, and in a culture deeply steeped in omens, where illness might be seen as divine punishment and hallucinations as signs from beyond. Playing mad gave you power. Terrifying, yes, but untouchable. Tonight you shift slightly beneath your blanket. It's nearly time. You exhale slowly, your heart rate dips. You close your eyes, not fully, just enough to look asleep. Then you start the act. A twitch, a grunt, a slow, rising groan. Your foot kicks once, deliberately brushing the wall. You murmur something incomprehensible, drawn from the scroll of old spirit chants you copied last week. Then you let out the scream. It's not high-pitched. That would be obvious. It's low, guttural, halfway between sorrow and something that shouldn't be human. It echoes just enough, then stops. You freeze. Outside, silenced, you wait. There's a distant cough, the sound of a door closing, then nothing. You stay still for another 5 minutes just to be sure. It's exhausting. Not just the performance, but the pressure of holding that illusion, of weaponizing human fear, of turning your body into a ghost story. You wonder how long you can keep doing this, how many more nights you'll be expected to howl like a cursed hermit just to avoid having to sleep in a tree again. But this is shinobi life. It's not glamour, it's not glory, it's calculated weirdness deployed with surgical precision, and in this moment it's keeping you safe. Tomorrow you'll change disguises, maybe become a merchant, maybe a blind fisherman, but tonight you are the whispering thing in the hut. And as long as the villagers keep avoiding you, the mission can proceed uninterrupted. You lie back, let your breath slow, and wait for the next nightmare. Your name isn't your name, at least not here, not in this village, not in this season, not in this skin. It hasn't been your name for weeks, maybe months. And now, even when someone whispers it behind closed doors or scrawls it on a hidden scroll, you don't immediately respond. You were supposed to be a travelling merchant this time. You arrived with a bundle of old sandals, some threadbare robes, and a pouch of copper coins baked to look older than they are. Your cover was clear. Peddler of fabrics, part-time messenger, fluent in 2 regional dialects and mildly allergic to chestnuts. Every detail mattered. Every detail had a purpose. And then you became useful. Someone needed help loading a cart. You helped. Someone needed fabric mended. You stitched. The town shrine needed repairs. You volunteered. And before you realized it, your temporary cover became your temporary life. Then it became your temporary reputation. Then it became you. Now you're not sure where the mask ends. Deep cover wasn't a fantasy in the world of shinobi. It was a fundamental skill. The best intelligence often came not from eavesdropping in alleys, but from becoming part of the furniture. The longer you stayed in one place without detection, the more value you could extract. The challenge wasn't just hiding, it was inhabiting. Ninjas were trained in disguise, yes, but also in performance. You learned how to cook regional dishes the way a local grandmother would. You memorized gossip, adopted vocal tics, learned the rhythms of a town's daily life until you could predict who would hang laundry when, and which neighbour would complain if it flapped too far into their garden. You weren't just pretending, you were absorbing. But it always came at a cost. This time, the mission was meant to last 5 days. Drop a message, track a courier, leave before your name took root. But 5 days turned to 12 when the courier was delayed by a sick child. 12 turned to 20 after a suspicious local guard started asking questions. By then, you'd already been given a place to sleep, invited to a community meal, and asked, kindly, insistently, to stay for the spring planting. Now it's day 34, and you're spending your mornings sweeping the shrine and your evenings debating the price of woven rope with elderly merchants who think you're the best listener they've met in years. You don't even have to try anymore. The cover is muscle memory, and that's the problem. You used to keep a mental ledger. What name you were using, what lies you'd told, who you had to avoid. It was clear. It had edges, but now it's blurring. You speak before thinking. You laugh without checking the cadence. You've caught yourself standing taller than your role allows. You almost corrected someone yesterday about the migration pattern of cranes. Knowledge your character shouldn't know. You're slipping. You lie awake at night, wondering if the mission's still ongoing. You pass the message on day 6. You track the courier by day 11. The information is gathered, but your handler never recalled you. No replacement arrived. No coded withdrawal notice hidden under your rice bowl. Just more days, more woven rope, more awkwardly heartfelt questions from a small child about whether you've ever seen a bear up close. You told him no. You lied. Again. There are stories, whispered in training halls, about agents who stayed in their roles for so long they never came back. Not because they died. Not because they failed. Because they forgot. Because they vanished into their own creation. The mission never ended because it never had a clean exit. Some of those agents stayed until old age, buried in their fake names, still carrying secrets they never got to deliver. You used to think those stories were exaggerated, meant to scare trainees. Now they feel like instructions, like a prophecy you're halfway through fulfilling. You don't know when it started, this fraying of self. Maybe it was when the old man down the street offered to make you a walking stick, even though you're not injured. Maybe it was when you learned to make pickled radish the same way your fake character's fake grandmother supposedly did. Maybe it was when someone used your real name, your true name, and you flinched like it was a curse. You're not afraid of being exposed. You're afraid that even if you were, it wouldn't matter, because there's no one left to unmask. Just a man who sells thread, gives advice about wind patterns, and no longer remembers whether he was supposed to be left-handed this time. Historically, this wasn't a rare dilemma. Extended missions could last months or longer. Some agents embedded in enemy territory for entire seasons, planting crops, attending festivals, joining village councils. They became part of the narrative, and the risk wasn't just discovery, it was erosion, the slow fading of personal identity beneath layer after layer of necessity. To combat it, some shinobi developed rituals. They would press small wooden tokens into their sleeves, carved with a symbol or name known only to them. They would recite poems backwards, scribble coded reminders in hidden journals, mutter self-affirming mantras during sleep. Anything to remember. You are not the role. You tried that. You carved your family crest into the base of your walking stick. It wore smooth within 2 weeks. You tried muttering a childhood phrase to yourself each morning, but now the phrase belongs to the merchant. He says it before meals. You wrote your name on the back of your ration pouch. You lost it during a river crossing. And now the village elder has begun talking about offering you a permanent space in the storehouse. You thanked him. You meant it. Tomorrow you'll try to break the cycle. Maybe leave a false trail. Maybe provoke suspicion. Maybe say something too clever, too suspicious. Something that might snap the illusion and force your recall. But part of you knows that the recall may never come. That perhaps your handler has decided your post is permanent. That your silence, your flawless commitment to the role, is the reason no one is coming to relieve you. You eat dinner alone that night. You bow to the neighbours. You stitch a torn satchel while humming a song you don't remember learning. Then when the fire has died and the doors are locked, you whisper your name. Your real one. Just once. It sounds strange, foreign, too sharp in your mouth. You pause, then try again. It's quieter the second time, softer. You don't know if you're remembering it right. The plan was simple, too simple, suspiciously simple. Get in, listen, get out. No messages to pass. No poison to slip into a teacup. No scrolls to steal. Just a brief appearance in the right place at the right time. A face in the crowd no one notices. You weren't even issued a backup identity this time. You were told you wouldn't need it. Which, in ninja logic, is basically a curse. So now, as you leap over a stone wall in the dark, half-blind, barefoot, with a throbbing rib and a pouch full of damp rice powder, you realise that once again, simplicity is just failure dressed in confidence. Behind you, someone shouts. Then come the arrows. No one talks enough about the running. The scrolls always speak of silence, shadows, disguise, but they never prepare you for how much of a ninja's job involves sprinting through uneven terrain, while being chased by people with superior footwear. You've studied misdirection techniques, sure. You've memorized the angles of escape routes, the hidden tunnels beneath shrines, the low branches perfect for climbing. But none of that helps when you're already mid-retreat, with no map, no gear, and a foot blister the size of a sparrow egg. This mission went wrong at the worst possible moment, just as you were leaving. You weren't caught inside a war council or rummaging through records. You were walking away, quietly, casually. And then, a sound, a breath too close, a movement that didn't belong, and you knew. Someone had spotted you, or maybe someone had recognized you. Not the face, but the pattern, the cadence of your walk, the absence of hesitation. You're good, but not invisible. Now you're running because the arrow started flying, and your plan, such as it was, ended at don't get caught. Real ninja escape plans were rarely elegant. If you've been imagining grappling hooks, secret tunnels, and heroic backflips into the moonlight, please let go of that now. Most escape plans were pragmatic chaos, based on environment, improvisation, and pure cardiovascular endurance. There were tactics, climbing tools, smoke bombs, distraction techniques like dropping coins or powder to confuse pursuit. but they were tools of desperation, not certainty. If you were escaping, it meant something had gone wrong. And when something went wrong, the best plan was to run until the people trying to kill you were either too confused, too tired, or too dead to continue. Your own training emphasized the grim practicality of escape. You learned to run in absolute silence, to cross rocky terrain without slipping, to sprint through forests without brushing a single branch. You ran barefoot for days to toughen your soles. You learned to breathe through pain and swallow nausea. Because if you ever had to flee, you wouldn't have time for hesitation. You'd just run. You're doing that now. The arrows are thinning. Either they've given up or they've lost sight of you, or they're waiting ahead. That's the kind of optimism you don't indulge in. You veer off the main path, plunging into the woods. The underbrush grabs at your robe. The thorns cut your legs, but you keep going. You leap a stream, slide down a slope, skid to a halt behind a boulder, crouching low, heart rattling against your ribs like an angry tea kettle. Silence, for now. You listen, not just with your ears, but with your skin. The woods are alive with the sounds of night, crickets, wind, the occasional shriek of something small being eaten by something bigger, but no footsteps, no clatter of armour, no torches. You wait longer than you need to, because the only thing worse than being chased is thinking you're no longer being chased, only to turn a corner and meet someone else's sword. Eventually you move again, not quickly, not confidently, just enough to get clear of this region before the dogs come. You've lost your sandals. One is wedged between two rocks somewhere back on the trail. The other is now a piece of bark pretending to be a shoe. Your toes are bleeding. Your robe is soaked in a mix of sweat, creek water, and something that might be duck droppings. You're not sure, you're not asking, you keep going. The escape, such as it is, lasts until dawn. When the light creeps across the mountains and the fog burns off the river, you're still moving. Limping now, but alive. You reach a small, disused shrine tucked in the roots of a hill, collapse beneath its eaves, and exhale for the first time in hours. You've escaped, if that word even applies. You were trained to be efficient. You were trained to be disciplined. But in moments like this, you realize just how much of survival isn't about skill. It's about patience, stamina, knowing how to keep moving long after your body says stop, knowing when to breathe, knowing not to scream when your ankle catches in a root and your face lands in a patch of nettles, and most of all, knowing that sometimes even the best planned missions end in a mad sprint through the night, barefoot and wild-eyed, running until the arrows stop. You rest in the shrine until the sun is high. Then you eat the last of your dry barley paste, drink from a stream with your hands, and start walking again. Because there's no pickup, no horse waiting in the trees, no handler with a warm fire and bandages, just the road, and another mission waiting beyond it. This is not a lair. It's barely even a shelter. It's a hole. A half-collapsed niche in the side of a limestone outcrop somewhere in the ungoverned wilderness, between two warlord territories, and right now, it's your home. You didn't choose it. You found it while crawling through wet underbrush after your second decoy trail failed, and your third disguise blew away in a gust of wind. It's just big enough to lie down if you curl up like a shrimp, and just high enough to bang your head on if you try to sit up without thinking. You're not alone in this hole. There is a snake in the rear corner, long, silent, vaguely patterned, the kind you hope is non-venomous, but you're too tired to check. It hasn't moved since you arrived. You've named it Daisuke, because naming things makes them less terrifying. You've made a pact. You don't disturb Daisuke. Daisuke doesn't end your career prematurely. So far it's working. There are also bats, 3 of them. They hang from the upper crevice and occasionally flutter down, mostly to defecate on your bedroll, which is a layer of leaves you try to arrange in a vaguely rectangular shape. They squeak at irregular intervals, twitch occasionally, and have absolutely no respect for your personal space. You named them after different types of fermented beans. You're starting to hate fermented beans. This is your fallback shelter, the emergency refuge you were trained to locate when things go completely off script. It's not supposed to be luxurious. It's not supposed to be comfortable. It's just supposed to exist, and that makes it better than most options. In your early training, you were taught to spot natural features that could serve as shelter when everything else failed. Hollow trees, dry riverbeds, abandoned storage huts, animal dens. You even practiced curling into drainage canals and hay bales to test how long you could stay hidden without breathing too loudly or sneezing. The ideal ninja, your instructor said, could live like moss, barely noticed, barely there, clinging quietly to rock and wood until the moment came to act. This cave? It's moss-level living. You've been in here for 3 days waiting for a patrol to give up searching the hills and return to town. The mission's not over. You still have the scroll hidden in a pouch you stitched into your sleeve. But you can't move yet. Not until they leave. Not until the road is clear. Not until Daisuke lets you pass. So you wait. You eat your ration paste in tiny pinches, chew it for long minutes until it dissolves into tasteless gum, and suck moisture from a leaf you hung to catch cave drips. You sleep in bursts, 15 minutes at a time, curled around your bundle of tools. You dream of open rooms, dry floors, and clean water. You wake to more bat squeaks and the damp sound of your own spine grinding against the cave wall. It's not the first time you've had to camp like this. Once, during your apprenticeship, you spent a week in a hole beneath an irrigation trench while enemy scouts circled above. You survived on pickled radish and a stolen rice ball you rationed down to molecules. Another time, you spent 4 days pretending to be dead in a field while flies measured your resolve. The cave isn't even the worst place you've stayed. It's just the most actively disgusting. There's a specific kind of itch that comes from mixing sweat, mould, bat droppings, and pure, unfiltered paranoia. You've reached that itch. It lives behind your ears now. No amount of scratching helps. You were taught to embrace discomfort. That's a pillar of shinobi philosophy. You practice pain to get used to pain. You sleep on cold stone to appreciate cold stone. You eat food so bland that tree bark feels festive by comparison. But even the scrolls didn't warn you about the psychological effects of being pooped on nightly by a bat named Miso. Historically, ninja shelters were nothing like the glamorous hideouts of modern fiction. No secret doorways or trap-laden sanctuaries, just places to disappear. A skilled shinobi could vanish into the geography, using caves, crevices, dry wells, or even the crawl spaces between buildings. The Iga and Koga regions, famous for their mountainous terrain, offered countless natural shelters, but the training emphasized a key point. If a space was dry, dark, and low to the ground, it was probably already occupied by something with fangs or talons. Share the space. Don't provoke. Survive together. Which is what you're doing now. You and Daisuke share this cave in silent, slightly tense agreement. The bats have no such agreement. They're freeloaders, loud ones. You've begun retaliating by tossing bits of dirt upward every time they squeak too close. This does nothing. It only makes them louder. You tried meditating on night 2, clearing your mind, slowing your breath, accepting the dripping ceiling and the tickle of cave moss on your ankle. You made it 6 minutes before a beetle the size of your thumb crawled across your eyelid. You've not attempted meditation since. But slowly the rhythm shifts. The patrolling soldiers thin out. The sounds of movement in the forest taper off. The occasional dog bark fades into distance. It's not over. Not yet. But the danger is receding. You'll wait 1 more night, then move. You lie in the dark, staring at the nothing above, feeling the soft scrape of your own pulse against your ribs. This is the in-between. Not part of the mission, not part of the escape, just the static zone where time stretches like kanji, and nothing moves except bats and doubts. Eventually you doze off. You dream of clean floors and seaweed soup. You wake with miso clinging to your head. And somehow you still prefer this to being caught. You're pressed against the base of the castle wall, heart pounding so loud it's starting to echo off the stone. It's midnight, the moon is high, the guards just passed, and your only way forward is up. This is the moment every scroll said would come. The grand infiltration, the daring climb, the silent ascent into the enemy stronghold. Only the scrolls never mentioned how badly the rope would smell, or how sharp the climbing claw is against your palm, or that you'd be wearing a robe soaked in your own flop sweat while trying to scale 30 feet of mossy granite, using knots you tied half an hour ago with shaking hands. They also didn't mention the weight of the panic sitting squarely in your chest. You've been trained for this. You've practiced scaling walls since your early years. You've climbed temple gates, warehouse roofs, even the side of a watchtower during a thunderstorm just to prove you could. But now that you're here, now that you're actually at the base of a castle with a mission to infiltrate, all you can think about is how far down it is from the top, even though you haven't started climbing yet. Historically, ninja infiltration didn't often look like a stylized rooftop ballet. It looked like this. A lone operative, armed with crude but effective tools, climbing in silence under cover of darkness, while praying that no one above decided to take a stroll or answer nature's call near a window. The grappling hook, or kaginawa, was a fundamental tool, but unlike the fantasy versions with spring-loaded arms and cinematic ease, the real ones were heavy, awkward, and unforgiving. Many ninja opted for a simpler method, a single iron claw tied to a rope or a hooked blade that could latch onto stone or crevice. Lightweight, concealable, but far less reliable. Which is what you're using now. One claw, one rope, and one shot. You look up. The wall is taller than it looked in the sketches. Of course it is. Nothing ever matches the diagrams. You test the claw's grip. It digs into a narrow seam between the stones. You tug it. It holds. That's the only affirmation you're going to get. You begin the climb. The rope groans. You do not. You bite your tongue to keep quiet. Every movement has to be fluid, deliberate, controlled. You've trained for this. Low center of gravity, legs doing most of the work, hands just guiding. But theory buckles under reality. The stones are slick. The rope is damp. Your foot slips within the first 10 feet. You catch yourself before you fall, but now your wrist is burning and your right sandal is dangling off your heel. You adjust, carefully, slowly. You make it to 15 feet. Above you, a narrow window flickers with firelight. You freeze. Hold your breath. Count to 10. The light shifts, then dimensions. No silhouette, no voice, no alarm. Just another servant checking on the lanterns. Or maybe it's your imagination trying to sabotage you. You press on. The claw bites again, this time with less confidence. You test it. It wobbles. You shift your weight, brace your knee against a protruding stone, and push upward using a method best described as climbing through sheer embarrassment. You reach the ledge at 25 feet. There's no window, no rope pull, just a slippery slope and a patch of mold that smells like bad tempura. Your hand grips the ledge. You pull. You don't scream when the ledge crumbles as you flinch, slip, scrape your thigh. Your claw catches just in time. You dangle for one breathless moment, not long enough to die, but long enough to contemplate whether rice farming might have been a better career choice. Eventually you reach the top. Not the grand peak, not the roof, just the lip of the wall, the edge where stone meets shadow. You hook your elbow over the ridge, swing a leg up, collapse with all the grace of a sack of wet laundry. You press your face to the cold stone, too tired to celebrate. This isn't victory, this is survival. You roll over, catch your breath, listen. No voices, no alarms, just the distant sound of insects and the creak of wood somewhere in the courtyard below. The mission continues, but for now, your job was to get inside, and you did. Barely. You learned in training that infiltration was often the easy part. The hard part was doing it again, with the same precision, the same silence, while leaving no trace. Climbing up is hard. Climbing down without being seen is borderline impossible, which means you'll be spending the next few hours hiding behind urns, moving through shadows, memorizing guard rotations, and praying that whatever you came for, message, item, overheard conversation, is worth the bruised ribs and existential dread. You pull your rope up, coil it, tuck the claw away. Everything goes back into your sleeve, your pouch, your belt. It's as if the climb never happened. Except your hands are shaking, except your robe is torn, except you can't stop thinking about the moment the ledge gave way. You lie still for a few minutes, letting your body quiet itself. You can't afford a mistake now, not when you've already spent every bit of luck getting up here. The wind shifts. You smell pine, smoke, candle wax. Someone's awake. You rise. Begin crawling along the wall's edge, low and slow. The next part of the mission awaits. You'll scale down later. Maybe, if you don't find another way out, if you don't get discovered, if Daisuke the snake doesn't make a surprise cameo from a garden bush. But for now, you made the climb, and in the world of the shinobi that's more than most ever do, even if your knees still haven't stopped shaking. You've been through some close calls before. There was the time you slept in a tree during a thunderstorm, the time you faked epilepsy to distract 2 guards, the time you spent 2 nights hiding beneath a horse trough and woke up partially pickled. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compares to the moment you realise that the cup of tea you're holding in your trembling hands is now being accepted directly by the very man you were sent here to kill. He smiles at you. You smile back. And your brain becomes a bowl of soup. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. You weren't even supposed to be indoors. The plan was simple. Infiltrate the outer courtyard as a delivery boy from the nearby temple, drop off the box containing the special sencha leaves, and walk away unnoticed. Someone else would serve it. Someone else would say the words. You were just the vessel, the background character, the shadow behind the tray. But your handler didn't account for the cook quitting this morning, or for the host's preference for fresh hands to serve delicate tea, or for the old guard who clapped you on the back and said, "You'll do?" before handing you a tray and pushing you through a rice paper door like you belonged there. Now you're kneeling in front of a local magistrate holding a cup that smells faintly of cherry blossom, fermented soybean, and the mildest possible dose of powdered aconite root. Enough to make him woozy, enough to disorient. Not lethal, just encouraging. He lifts the cup. You watch it move upward like it's on a funeral pyre. You know you shouldn't stare. You know this isn't part of your character. You're just a tea boy. You should bow, shuffle backward, disappear. Instead, you freeze. He looks at you again. Your tea, he says, smells excellent. You nod, because words will betray you now. Then he gestures, not to drink, to sit. You weren't trained for this, not this part at least. You were trained to brew poison in silence, to steep herbs in exact measurements, to identify how long a leaf must be dried to disguise its natural bitterness. You can pick out 50 plants by smell alone, most of which can make someone forget their own name if brewed correctly. You can handle vials in the dark, dose a rice ball by touch, and dry fry a mushroom into a powder that smells like sandalwood and behaves like anesthesia. But you were never trained to make polite conversation while watching your target drink a cup of medicated tea you weren't even supposed to be near. You sit. A servant pours another cup. For you, you stare at it. You have no idea what's in it. There's a tradition here. The host drinks what the guest drinks. It's meant to show respect, to ward off suspicion, to balance the scales. You bow, you lift the cup, you pray, and then you drink. Historically, shinobi were often expected to blend in as servants, tea boys, wood carriers, paper runners. It wasn't glamorous, but it got them close to the people who mattered. The expectation was never direct action, not usually. It was preparation. Set the stage, let others play the scene. Poison, when used, was a subtle art. It was less about death and more about disorientation, delay, a moment of weakness. The target grows faint, misses an appointment, loses their balance. Maybe they say too much. Maybe they collapse in front of the wrong person. That's the real goal. But sometimes, plans don't respect your careful timing. Sometimes you end up in the room. The magistrate drinks. You wait. He makes a satisfied sound, then motions to the tray again. You pour well, he says. You nod. He says something about politics, about the upcoming inspection, about taxes and the rising cost of sandalwood. You pretend to listen. You mimic the reactions of the other servants in the room. You laugh once. Too hard. You immediately look down. No one corrects you, no one yells. The dizziness hits him slowly. At first he blinks more than usual. Then he frowns at something no one said. Then his hand drifts slightly when he reaches for the next cup, and the edge of his sleeve dips into the tray. He doesn't notice. You're sweating now, because the dose is supposed to be mild, but maybe you steeped it too long. Maybe the tea was stronger than expected. Maybe the powdered radish root you added to disguise the bitterness reacted badly with the fermented rice cakes from breakfast. He shifts in his seat. He stands, wobbles. Then he excuses himself to get some air, stumbles out the door, and you're left sitting at a table with 3 other officials who now expect you to pour their tea too. So you do. When you finally leave the building, it's not in a flurry of escape. It's not a leap over a wall or a sprint into the trees. It's a slow, measured shuffle down a stone path with a half-empty tea tray and a new understanding of what terror tastes like when served politely in porcelain. You don't look back. You don't speak to anyone. You walk for a full mile before anyone even questions your presence, and by then you're already halfway into your secondary disguise. Hat lowered, accent changed, posture adjusted. You're not the tea boy anymore. You're the man who delivered the firewood, or maybe the monk. You'll decide at the next checkpoint. Later you hear that the magistrate fell ill with what was officially diagnosed as hot spleen wind, a term doctors invented when they didn't know what else to call fainting with mild hallucinations. He recovered. Mostly. But he cancelled 2 meetings and missed a shipment inspection, which means you succeeded. Sort of. You also drank poison. You also served 4 people and can't remember 3 of their faces. You also now associate the smell of cherry blossom tea with the raw sensation of your soul exiting your body in waves of silent panic. But you're alive, and more importantly, no one saw your hands shake. Sleep is a luxury you've learned to live without. But lately it's become more than deprivation. It's now a full-blown hostage situation, and the hostage takers have feathers. You're 3 days into a mission that should have been over in 1. The target's compound is just past the bamboo grove, nestled at the base of a steep hillside. You've already mapped the perimeter. You've counted guards, memorized shift changes, even spotted the servant who's been smuggling out information, exactly as planned. The only thing standing between you and success is a flock of birds who appear to be working for the enemy. It started innocently. On the first night you moved through the trees just after dusk, slow, silent, careful, and startled a pair of sparrows. They chirped. No big deal. Then they chirped again. Then louder. Then they took flight in a flurry of feathers that drew the attention of a passing guard, who paused, turned his lantern toward your position, and sniffed the air like he could smell your intent. You froze. The moment passed. The guard moved on. The birds, however, did not. They've been watching ever since. In the world of shinobi, silence isn't just about your own body. It's about your environment. You train to move with the wind, to step only when the breeze shifts, to blend your breath into the night's rhythm. But nothing disrupts stealth quite like nature itself deciding to declare war on your career. Birds were not mentioned in the scrolls. You were taught to neutralize sound, to sprinkle gravel to dampen floors, to wedge thin rice paper between boards to muffle squeaks, to chew pine needles to kill breath odor. But no one ever said, "Here's what to do when a crane screams at you every time you crouch behind a bush." It wasn't just the sparrows. On night 2, it was a heron, tall, majestic, and somehow perched exactly where you needed to be. The moment you got within 5 paces, it let out a noise so guttural it felt like an insult. It didn't fly away, it just stared, judgmental, as if it knew. Then came the crows. You've dealt with crows before. Smart, social, suspicious. This group was especially large, at least 5, possibly more. You think they're nesting near the watchtower. Every time you move within sight of the western perimeter, they stir. Not flee, not scatter, just stir. Wings flapping, throats cawing, enough to send every guard in a 10-meter radius on high alert. You tried throwing a rock. They caught it mid-air and dropped it back at your feet. You're convinced they're organized. By night 3, you're a mess. Your eyes burn, your muscles ache. You've cycled through 3 identities in the nearby village just to avoid suspicion while regrouping. Merchant son, travelling prayer bead seller, mute shrine sweeper. You've slept in bursts. 15 minutes here, a few seconds leaning against a tree, 1 full hour inside a basket that smelled like turnips and defeat. But every time you approach the compound, the birds alert the guards. You've tried everything. You moved during wind gusts, they still noticed. You altered your scent with dried mint and mugwort. They laughed. You even disguised yourself as a scarecrow, spending 4 hours in a rice field with your arms outstretched and a straw hat pulled low, hoping they'd see you as one of their own. They pooped on you, twice. There's no historical record of ninja versus bird conflict, but there should be. Because in feudal Japan, many daimyo and military leaders trained birds, especially crows and hawks, to recognize intruders. Certain estates maintained aviaries not just for status but for surveillance, and even wild birds played an accidental role in security. A sudden explosion of wings from the trees was a sign, a warning, a whisper of unnatural movement. Experienced shinobi learned to read bird behavior the same way they read human faces. Stillness meant safety. Stirring meant compromise. A flock taking flight in a spiral. That was your cue to disappear, immediately. You wish you'd read more bird scrolls, because now you're stuck in a stalemate. Crouched in a damp ravine, staring up at a branch line filled with sleepy, malicious little feathery spies, and you're losing. You can't keep doing this. Your rations are low, your rope has mildew, you've started talking to yourself. Worse, answering. Your face is swollen from a mosquito swarm that seems to be working in tandem with the birds. Last night you hallucinated a small owl giving you mission feedback. You nodded. You need to end this, so you change tactics. You wait until midday, broad daylight, high sun, full visibility, and walk straight toward the estate dressed as a travelling entertainer. Bright robe, flute in hand, sandals clean, posture friendly. You stroll with the confidence of someone with nothing to hide. The birds watch. They tilt their heads. You ignore them. At the gate, you bow. You play a tune. One of the guards nods, mildly entertained. You ask if you can perform a blessing for the household's ancestors. He shrugs and points you toward the outer courtyard. You step inside. No alert, no guards drawn, no cause of betrayal. Just the slow, satisfying silence of slipping past the perimeter while everyone's expecting noise. You learn something that day. It isn't always about beating the surveillance. Sometimes you have to join it. Wrap yourself in visibility so thoroughly that you disappear in the opposite direction. The birds don't care about guests. They care about the unnatural, the subtle, the careful. You'd been too quiet. Now you make noise, a flute, a cough, a passing prayer. You mask your movements in plain sight. You get what you came for. A small scroll hidden beneath a shrine statue, passed to you by a servant who never makes eye contact. You bow, you walk out, and the birds, traitorous, knowing, smug, let you go. That night you finally sleep. Not well, not deeply, but without interruption. No wing beats, no cause, no rustling in the leaves like a small committee plotting your failure. Just dreams, warm, incoherent, and free of feathers. You wake up the next morning feeling slightly more human. Then a sparrow lands on your pack, and you wonder, just for a moment, if you'll have to kill a bird to finish this job. You've now mastered the art of fake sleep screaming, sucked pebbles for dinner, lived in a cave with a snake named Daisuke, and spent 3 sleepless nights losing a psychological war to birds. That's commitment. That's espionage. That's honestly too much. Drop a like, maybe even a subscribe, and let me know in the comments how long you think you'd last before mistaking a dried frog ration for emotional support. Now close your eyes, slow your breath, and remember, you are the knight. You are the moss. You are 87% sure you tied that rope correctly. Sleep well, Shinobi. The crows are watching.